Welcome to Stellar Sisters, the podcast where cosmic wisdom meets soul-enriching conversation.
We explore astrology, human design, and the unique blueprint of your soul, helping you understand yourself on a deeper level.
Consider this your permission slip to embrace the magic of being authentically you.
Let's begin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Stellar Sisters. I'm your host, Shaniel, your guide for all things astrology.
And I'm Sydney, guide for all things human design.
And today's episode is going to be all about your big three in astrology, your sun, moon, and rising, and your incarnation cross in human design. And we decided to kind of focus on these elements of your birth chart and your human design chart because they really speak to your purpose in this life. And I think they go together really, really well. So if you'd like to follow along with your own chart during this episode, you can pull up both your astrology birth chart and your human design chart on our podcast website. So you just go to stellarsisterspodcast.com and you can download both your charts for free right on our website. And if you don't know, especially your human design incarnation cross, you can pull it up there. Let's jump into it. We'll kick things off by starting out with the astrology big three. Then Sydney will go to the human design cross, and we'll do some really fun chart examples at the end. All right. So with astrology, whenever I'm doing a birth chart reading or looking at someone's birth chart for the first time, the first place that I always go to is their ascendant or their rising sign. So I'd like to start there, really, with this podcast. The ascendant is such a personal point in your chart because it literally marks the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the very moment that you took your first breath, at the very moment that you were born, the very moment that you became a separate person from your mother. You know, the 12th house marks, or I'm sorry, not the 12th house, the first house is the marker of your ascendant. Your ascendant marks the sign of your first house. And it really kind of separates from the 12th house, which is kind of represented by the world in between worlds and is kind of known to be like the womb environment, you know. And so the first house and the rising sign really marks that individuation moment in your life. That moment that represents you as an individual. And really that's what the rising sign represents. It represents you, your energy, your character, your appearance, your personality, your expression, your physical vitality. It represents your interests, your life focus, and your motivation for life.
And I just want to quickly say, Chanel is so good at looking at someone and being like, I think they could be a Leo rising or a Libra rising just based on their appearance and what they look like. It's scary accurate how well she's able to do that.
It's just it's so true that different rising signs do have different markers for like physical appearance a lot of the times, which is funny. Like Leo risings usually have like a mane, they usually have like hair
Or
that,
big eyebrows.
yeah, or big eyebrows, you know. Um, you know, I think Capricorn risings, I'm a Capricorn rising, usually kind of have like sharp features or sharp cheekbones, which I think I have the
Yeah.
cheekbones of a Capricorn rising. Yeah, it really does mark your physical appearance. Cancer risings usually are very kind of soft looking. They might have rounder, softer facial features like the moon, that rules them. Um, so yeah, that is very interesting because it does mark your physical appearance.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's the ascendant marks your first house, and the first house in astrology is the only chart or the only house in astrology that really solely represents you, who you are, your appearance, your personality, your expression. So your rising sign is very much you. And in ancient astrology, really, when someone asked you about your sign, they were asking about your rising sign, not your sun sign.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. The sun sign changes signs every month, right? So, like, everyone born in like a 30-day period has the same sun sign. But the rising sign is so personal to you because the sign rising on the eastern horizon changes about every 2.5 hours. So it's
Mm.
so, so, so dependent on the exact time that you were born. And that's why it's so important you have the exact time that you were born when you're coming for a reading, um, because that time sets up your rising sign and therefore sets up your entire chart and where all of the planets fall in your chart. Um, yeah. And what is also so, so important about your rising sign is the planet that rules your rising sign. And then what sign and house that planet is in your chart. Um, because that really steers the direction of your life and your life focus and your interests. So, for example, I'm a Capricorn rising. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. I have Saturn in the 12th house in Sagittarius um, in my birth chart. So the 12th house is going to be a major area of life direction and life focus for me, um, which I think it is. That 12th house is that house of kind of spirituality or hidden things, can be the house of struggles or mental health struggles or working with people within that realm. And I do think that all of those things have kind of colored my life in some way, for sure. So if you are in Aries or Scorpio rising, Mars is going to be that planet for you. If you are a Taurus or Libra rising, Venus is going to be that planet for you. If you're a Gemini or Virgo rising, Mercury is going to be that planet for you. If you're a Cancer rising, that's the moon. If you're a Leo rising, that's the sun. And if you're a Capricorn or Aquarius rising, it's Saturn. And if you are a Pisces or Sagittarius rising, that's Jupiter. So you really want to look at what sign and house that planet is in your chart to really tell you about your life focus and direction. So some keywords for the ascendant, and what that means is it's really your personality, your character, your appearance, expression, your physical vitality, and motivation for life. It really represents you. Um, Moving on to the sun sign. So, this is kind of a question I think a lot of people will have. They're like, well, I'm my rising sign and I'm my sun sign. Like, what is the difference between the two? What do they both mean? And they're both very important. And they both do have different meanings. So if you think about literally the sun in the solar system, it's the center of the solar system. And you can think of it the same way in your chart. It is the central organizing force of your life around which everything else operates. You know, the sun and the sign it's in and the house it's in your birth chart is really where you shine. It represents your spark for life. It represents your conscious will, your soul desires and purpose, and the major overarching goals that you're striving for in your life. So, your sun sign and the house it's in will really be one of the major themes of your life. Um, the sun can also sometimes represent parental figures, specifically a father figure in your life. So you can kind of look to your sun sign, and that can sometimes point to your relationship with a parental figure, specifically father, typically with the sun. So some keywords that I really give for the sun sign is it's our conscious will, the central force, the spark of our life, where we shine in the chart. So you can kind of see that difference between the sun. The rising sign is you, your physical appearance, your vitality, your expression, your character. And the sun sign is your will, you know. It will be an important part of your life, your spark for life, where you shine. And I do also kind of think that the sun sign, someone can be a Leo sun, but if they're a Capricorn rising, they're going to come off way more serious,
Mhm.
and maybe grounded than maybe a Leo sun with a Sagittarius rising, who's going to be, um, maybe more outgoing and goofy and adventurous and spontaneous,
Mhm.
So you can
Yeah.
kind of almost take a look at the sun sign through the lens of the rising sign in the birth chart. Um, and then lastly, we'll talk about the moon sign. Um, so your moon sign really represents your physical incarnation and what you need every day to live out your sun sign, to live out your big goals and your soul's purpose. Your moon sign represents your emotional needs and how and what you need to nurture yourself. It represents your instincts, habits, and your subconscious needs. It's really how you nourish yourself on a physical level. And it represents the body that we have um, in this incarnation. So if the sun kind of represents our will and our soul's purpose, the moon represents, if you kind of think of the sun as the soul's purpose, and then the moon represents our physical body and our incarnation in which the soul lives and what your physical body needs in an everyday kind of way to live out your overarching purpose.
Love that.
Um, yeah. And yeah, so what do you need every day to keep up your drive and motivation? How do you nourish yourself in a daily way? Um, yeah, and it can really reflects our daily habits, needs, emotions, what we need to nurture ourselves. And the moon, like the sun, can represent parental figures in the chart. And the moon is really representing more of the mother, and of the feminine way that we were nurtured in our life. Yeah. So that's kind of like sun, moon, rising, kind of how they differ from each other. And I do want to mention sect in astrology, um, because that plays very much into the big three in astrology. So if you were born during the daytime versus nighttime, that can play out in your birth chart. So if you're born during the day, the sun, during the daytime, the sun's out, right? So the sun is kind of the main source of light. But if you're born at nighttime, the moon is the main source of light. And so if you're born during the day, you can maybe resonate a little bit more strongly with your sun sign. And if you were born at night, you may resonate more strongly with your moon sign. And the way you can tell that is typically is if your sun is in houses 1 through 6, you were born at night, and if your sun is in houses 7 through 12, you were born during the day. The general rule of thumb. Um, and if you think about that, and this can maybe kind of help further the understanding of the difference between the sun and the moon in the chart. If you're walking down the street during the daytime, you are probably just like in your head, going about, doing your thing, you know, thinking about all of the things that you need to get done during the day, just normal, right? But if you are walking down the street at night, your instincts are on a little bit more. Your instincts are a little bit more heightened, right? You're like, what was that sound? What is that rustling? There's a difference between that daytime and that nighttime, you know. And so if you're born at night, or the moon is very prominent in your chart, you might resonate more with that kind of like instinctual resonance of the moon. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's me. I was born at night,
Mhm.
and the moon's in kind of a prominent chart in place in my chart, and that definitely resonates for sure.
Mm.
I've
Yeah.
never heard it explained that way.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. So your rising sign is also always going to be very important. But if you're born at night, your moon sign might resonate with you more. And if you're born during the day, sun sign would resonate with you more. And then the other part of this whole thing really is the moon phase that you're born under as well, when you're taking into account the big three. Because the moon has different levels of light in the night sky, depending on what phase it's in. A new moon is a completely dark sky. The moon has no light of its own, whereas a full moon is the moon fully illuminated. It's the most light in the night sky. Um, so someone who is born under a new moon is going to have a very different energy than someone who is born on a full moon. New moon people are usually people who are initiating lots of things. They're trying to differentiate themselves. They're pioneers. They have this kind of like get up and go kind of energy. Whereas full moon people are really here to fully express their gifts. They might be people who are naturally take up space or are in the spotlight more. Um, if you are born under a first quarter moon phase, you are really here to kind of really create things. Still in that initial phase of the moon, um, but yeah, the moon phase also can kind of we also want to take that into account when we're looking at a birth chart. Um, but yeah, that's really kind of like the big three in a nutshell. And I mean, I could talk about each one of these probably at length. Um, but for the sake of time, really, really the meaning of the big three.
Yeah, I love that. And you're going to hear us say that all the time. I mean, we could talk about all of these things for hours and hours, each individual aspect of everything in the chart in both astrology and human design, but trying to keep it sweet and short for you so it makes sense and it's not overwhelming and too much information.
For sure.
So now I'm going to talk about incarnation crosses in human design. And the cross of incarnation, it's comprised of the four most powerful gates in your chart. So it's your sun and earth gates. They're coming together to kind of tell a story of the energy of who you are and of who you're here to be. So this is kind of your life purpose. It's not just this one thing that you're supposed to do here, but it's more so an energy that's going to show up in everything that you do. So, not just what you're doing for your job, but also your hobbies, your relationships. It's going to show up in everything that you do. You're here to be this energy, this essence, if you will. And there's 192 basic incarnation crosses. And there's actually technically 768 specific crosses that are used in analysis. And that just has to do with the hexagrams and what line your gates are in. So I think that's super interesting because you as an individual are just so unique. You in your chart, if you take into consideration, like Chanel was saying, your rising sign and how it changes every, what, 2 hours ish,
Hmm.
that plus your sun sign plus the moon, the moon changes a lot too. Everybody has different moon signs. Plus the incarnation cross, there's so many different ones. It's just showing you how unique, you really are, how each one of us is just so unique and there's so many different iterations of it. And so the sun gates and the earth gates are the most prominent energy in your chart. And there's a lot that can go into the cross. And again, I don't want to overwhelm you, so I'm just going to touch on a few things that I find fascinating about this. Um, First of all, if you look at if you look at your chart, if you download it, you're going to see the body graph. And then you'll also see the rave mandala. And you'll see that the sun sign, whatever your sun gate is, your earth gate's going to be in opposition to it. So, if you're an Aquarius sun, your earth gate is going to be in Leo. So it's opposing it, it's grounding it. And then your subconscious, your design side, the red side, is going to be square your personality sun. So that's where the cross is coming in. And I find that fascinating because, I'll use myself as an example. I'm an Aquarius sun. My subconscious sun is in Scorpio. And then my earth gates are in Leo and Taurus. So you have those four fixed signs making up my cross. And each gate can have a particular meaning, but I find that fascinating in and of itself, how the crosses are made up. Um,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that about the
yeah,
cross.
yeah,
And I think what's interesting about that, just hearing that in from an astrology perspective is, that's the square to an Aquarius, right? Scorpio and Aquarius are square. Scorpio and Leo or Aquarius and Taurus are square. I mean, in Aquarius and Leo are opposites, but the square in astrology is of the nature of Mars, which is of the nature of action. So a square, it's causing some sort of friction in astrology, but without friction, we wouldn't be a
yes,
little bit uncomfortable and we wouldn't act,
right,
So it's causing us to act that
yeah,
square,
yeah, yes,
which is the cross, right?
yeah,
It's like literally a cross. So,
yeah, exactly. And the sun gates, like Chanel said, with the sun, it represents your life force, your purpose, what you radiate. Think of it as like your superpowers, the gates of your sun. And then your earth gates represent what grounds you in, what stabilizes you, and what supports those superpowers.
Mm,
So I love this analogy. Think of your earth gates as the roots of your sun's energy. So they're keeping you steady, while you shine.
I love that.
Yeah. And this is another thing I find fascinating about it. The wheel is basically a map of our year. So if you're looking at the astrological wheel, the year starts, the spring equinox starts with Aries, and we move throughout the year. And if you look at the Rave mandala, you'll see that all of the gates are with the zodiac signs. And the way the crosses are broken up, they're broken up into four quarters. And the four quarters tells us as a humanity what we're here to do. So in the four quarters, we're here to either begin, build, bond, or evolve. And if you're tuned into the seasons and you kind of follow the wheel of the year, the first quarter with Incarnation Crosses actually starts in Aquarius. So this is like if you're following the wheel of the year, it's the beginning of February. It's known as Imbolc in the wheel of the year. And it's when we start to see those very first subtle signs of spring. So, you see like the snowdrops coming up and like Groundhog's Day, they're seeing if he sees his shadow or not. Um, so I find this fascinating that the way the incarnation crosses, it starts out there, uh, beginning of February. It's the middle of Aquarius, and then it goes to like mid Taurus, so beginning of May, and then the second quarter goes from mid Taurus to mid Leo, and the third quarter goes from mid Leo to mid Scorpio. And then the last quarter goes from mid Scorpio back to mid Aquarius, like the end of January. So I just love that that is how it's all laid out. I just find it
Yeah,
fascinating.
it
And
is
so,
super interesting.
yeah. And so the first quarter is called initiation. It's if your sun gate is in the first quarter, your purpose is fulfilled through the mind. So conceptualizing, educating, explaining. The second quarter is called civilization. Your purpose is fulfilled through form. So, building, supporting, creating, like the material plane. And then the third quarter is called duality. And this is what you have, Chanel. And the purpose is filled through bonding, co creating connection, relationships, choosing a mate. Very Libra.
Super Libra.
Yeah. And then the fourth quarter is called mutation. So it's the purpose fulfilled through transformation. So attaining full potential, success, awareness. It's like next generation focused.
Okay, that's super interesting because all of those quarters that you just described sound so familiar to the moon phases.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like that first quarter,
Yeah.
it's like
Exactly.
the new moon to the first quarter moon,
Yep.
right? That initiatory phase. First quarter moon to the full moon is okay, the main structure is built, but what do we need to do to tweak it to make sure it's right?
Right.
The
Yep.
third quarter is okay, the structure's here, it's fulfilled, the people can come, we can find,
And
the people
connect.
and the connections. And then
Yep.
the third quarter is okay, what do we need to tweak or refine this to start that cycle again? And
Yeah.
maybe some of that like break down to start fresh, to start new.
Yes. Yeah. You could have your sun gate in the initiation quarter in human design, but then you could also have be born under a full moon and have those two energetics in play. Or like
Mm.
me, you could I was born in the initiation quarter, so my sun gate's there, and I'm also born under a new moon. So I have this extra flavor, if you will, of initiation energy and kind of starting things and sparking things. So it's really cool to look at those different nuances and kind of combine them. And you might resonate with, well, I feel like I have this initiation energy, but like my moon phase is something else. you know, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
you are born in the initiation quarter, or you really resonate with the duality quarter, but you
Mm-hmm.
also initiate with or resonate with initiating something. Maybe you're born under a new moon. So it's just cool to look at those little nuances.
Super, super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a good point to like not get so caught up in like one placement or one thing about your chart because everything is so nuanced and layered, you know,
Yeah.
and changing constantly
Hmm.
too. With your progress chart and astrology. I mean, we don't need to go into all of that at this episode. I'm sure we will do an episode about it, but um yeah, there's just so everything is just so layered and nuanced and
Yeah.
very, very cool.
And so I think the point we're trying to get across is that everyone is just so unique and there are so many different aspects that go into your chart. So one other thing to note about these crosses is that you're going to see when you pull it up, you don't have to know how to look up your sun or earth gates. It'll show you on the chart what you are. It'll tell you. And you're going to see it as either saying you're a right angle cross, a left angle cross, or a juxtaposition cross. And that comes from your profile numbers. So what it's telling you is with these crosses is the karma that you have in this lifetime. So right angle crosses can have personal karma. That's about 64% of people that have this. It's if you're a 1-3, a 1-4, a 2-4, a 2-5, a 3-5, a 3-6, or a 4-6. So if your first number is a lower number than your second number, you're going to have a right angle cross. And it's about your relationship to yourself. So, you overcoming imposter syndrome or pushing past fears that you have. It's about your own journey, it's about your self discovery. It's important to think about being brave, bold, checking in to see kind of what your own internal shadows or fears are. And then the left angle cross have transpersonal karma. So that's about 33% of us. It's 5 1s, 5 2s, 6 2s, and 6 3s. So Chanel and I both have this. And this is if your first number is bigger than your second number. And the biggest karmic lessons that you learn are the way you impact and affect other people. So, how are you affecting other people in your life, your partner, your family? You're here to impact others. And then finally, the juxtaposition crosses, they have fixed or no karma. And this is more rare. This is about 3% of people that have this. And it's anyone with a 4-1 profile. And
Oh,
the
so only four ones have the juxtaposition.
yep, only 4 1s have this. And and this is pretty rare if you are a 4-1. It's rare that you would be this. And this is so fun because they're here to more so play and explore and kind of go deep and bring a lightness to that. And they can be kind of a bridge between the left and the right angle crosses. So kind of helping people go to a new depth in this lifetime. And the impact is about karmic balance. It's about holding a fixed frequency that others can either resonate with or pivot around. So I find the 4-1 profile fascinating. And I think it's just so fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are they here to kind of have both like personal karma and transpersonal karma?
No, it's more so that they just have a fixed karma. So it's not necessarily that they're focused on the self or the other, but it's just almost like taking from their experiences and learning from that and just kind of playing like the earth is their playground and then kind of helping the other types, the right or left, um, kind of go to more depths, if you will. Does that
Of
make
their karma.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah. So, that's a lot of information in and of itself. But with those two things, we also look at the four gates that make up your incarnation cross to really feel into to your essence. Um, so, taking in looking at your sun and earth gates on each side, the personality and design side, and kind of how they come together to kind of tell you what your life theme is. Um, so now I think we can go into some examples. So Chanel will run you through the big three, and then I'll go over the person's incarnation cross. Um, we got a lot of responses on Instagram of people wanting to share their charts and be examples, and we can't do all of them because there was a lot, which is
Mhm.
so awesome. So thank you for sharing and supporting. And we have like a list that we can use for other episodes. So if you did write in, now we have a little library that we can pull from. Um, but we do have we're gonna go run through both of our charts. We're gonna run through Drew Barrymore's chart. She's a great example, and then two other examples that we have. So Chanel's gonna run through the big three now.
Yeah, sure. So I'll share Drew's chart on the screen here. So her chart is just so interesting. So we'll start with the rising sign since that's typically what I start with. So she's a Gemini rising. Gemini is the sign that really is curious, intellectual, talkative, communicative. And I mean, Drew Barrymore is a talk show host.
Yeah.
She talks for a living. That is what she does. She's also a writer. She has her own magazine. Um, it's just all, I believe, yeah, she's written a book, if not several books. I don't know exactly, but that's very Gemini, the talking, reading, writing, speaking, being curious, having a natural curious disposition, she's just such a great example of a Gemini rising. And as a Gemini rising, Mercury is her chart ruler. She has Mercury up here in the ninth house, um, which means that a big part of her life direction and focus will be towards ninth house activities, which is um, religion or spirituality, which is publishing, which is kind of discovering, who you are, truth with a capital T. Um, you know, I think Drew has expressed in many different ways what a big impact, kind of what a spiritual person she is, in her own spirituality. Um, I think religion has played an important part in her life. When she was married, her husband was Jewish, and she is raising her children in the Jewish faith, and she's been very open about that. So she even talked about potentially converting to Judaism at one point, which is a very ninth house topic. I don't believe she ever did, but this ninth house themes are very prominent in her life. And one signification of the ninth house is publishing. And like I said, she has her magazine. She has published books. Um, you know, uh, Traveling would be a big theme for this life. All with those ninth house themes. So I think she really does embody that very well.
Huge.
Yeah. Um, the next thing that's really interesting about her chart is her moon sign is down here in Cancer in the second house, and it is directly conjunct Saturn in Cancer as well. So this is really interesting because typically the moon in Cancer is the moon in its home sign, which is represents all of the best qualities of nurturing and, needing a lot of care. Um, but with Drew's moon sign, it is directly conjunct Saturn in Cancer, which is Saturn is the planet that can represent restriction and boundaries. And especially in the sign of Cancer is Saturn in its fall, um, which means Saturn is in a really it's not in a good place in Drew's chart. And specifically, Saturn in Cancer can represent a lack of those Cancerian types of things, which is nurturing and care and love and emotional availability and things like that. And what I think Drew's chart is a good example of astrologically is um, the moon representing the mother, um, because Drew had a very difficult upbringing and a
Okay.
very difficult fraught relationship with her mother. And she was a famous at a very young age, very famous child actor, but she was also thrown into adult activities way too early. Like, I think she was going to the clubs when she was like 9, 10, 11, 12, and her mother would literally bring her along to these clubs. Um, and she actually entered rehab at age of 13, you know, and ended up getting emancipated from her mother at age 14. And, to this
Wow.
day, I think has a very fraught, difficult relationship with her mom, and that in her chart, this moon in Cancer conjunct Saturn in Cancer. I think this is an extreme example of this, but kind of really represents the lack of nurturing and care, um, really that she had specifically as a child.
Wow.
Um, and what's interesting about that is in astrology, each age is correlated with a different house in the birth chart, and age 13 actually is a second house year, which would make
Wow.
the themes of this year of that year, the moon conjunct Saturn themes really come up at 13, and that is the year that she entered rehab.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
This is such a great example.
yes, yes. Um, so that's really interesting about her moon sign. Um, but what also is super interesting is her sun sign. And Drew has a Pisces sun up here in the 10th house, which means that the central organizing force is going to be her professional life and her public life, you know. Um, and obviously Drew Barrymore is one of the most famous actresses in the world. She's had a very successful career. She's a very, very public figure, which is very Sun in the 10th house. With Sun in the 10th house, you have to live out your fate, your karma, your destiny in some way in the public, through your professional life, through your public life. Um, and what's even more interesting about that is she also has Jupiter and Venus there in Pisces, along with her sun sign. Um, and this is Jupiter in its home sign of Pisces and Venus in its exaltation sign of Pisces. And they're conjunct, which means their energy is kind of amplified there together. This is such a strong, positive placement. This is probably one of the most positive placements that you could have in a birth chart. Kind of representing a big career, one that's focused on Venusian themes such as connection and beauty and art. Um, and Drew has her own makeup line, which is very Venusian. She has her own line of aesthetic home goods, you know, which is very Venusian. Um, so it kind of, and also what I like about her chart is it can really show you that juxtaposition between this very positive placement in her chart, which is her 10th house of career, mixed in with a really difficult aspect of her chart, which is
Mm,
her moon sign conjunct Saturn, you know? And one you can kind of have both, like one more difficult or challenging aspect in a chart doesn't kind of negate everything, you know, doesn't make everything difficult. But, you know, she did come from a very difficult upbringing. But despite that, has had a very big, huge, positive career.
wow.
Yeah, she has a fascinating chart.
She
She really.
does. And she's so Piscean. I didn't realize she had Jupiter and Venus there. And you can
Mm-hmm.
just feel that in her energy of how she shows up on Instagram and on her talk show. You can feel that
Yes.
in her.
Yes. I mean, she's very watery, you
Yeah.
know, with that Pisces sun. I mean, if you've ever watched her talk show, the way that she interacts with her guests, like she's touching them and
Hmm.
facing them and like very connected to them and makes them feel so safe, you know, and like
Yeah.
held and nurtured, which is a very water sign, very Piscean energy.
And a very Cancer moon energy too.
Yes, and Cancer moon. She has a lot of that water energy in her chart, along with that mix of like Gemini curiosity and talkativeness and intellectualism. So, I mean, she's just such a great embodiment, really, of her whole chart.
So cool. So Drew has the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix. She has gates 55, 59, 34, and 20. So you read this with your conscious side first. So the conscious sun is 55, and then her earth gate is 59. And then the subconscious sun is 34, and her subconscious earth is 20. So there's four different crosses with the sleeping phoenix in them. If you have one of these crosses, like think of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. When the phoenix dies and then it's rising from the ashes. That's kind of like a life theme with anyone with this sleeping phoenix cross. You're always going to have these experiences of kind of death and rebirth. That's kind of playing out in different areas of your life. It doesn't mean that it's going to be just one specific area. You could just see it kind of come out in different areas of your life, throughout your lifetime. And she is in the quarter of initiation and she has personal karma. She's a 4-6. And with gate 55, it's the gate of the spirit. She really wants to feel life fully. So that's one of her superpowers. And that grounds in the earth gate of gate 59, kind of breaking down emotional walls to create closeness. And
Mm.
gate 59 is actually
Whoa, wait a minute.
yeah.
Are you serious? That's moon conjunct Saturn.
Yeah, and gate 59 is the gate of sexuality. So people with this gate, Faye's son, my daughter Faye, her son gate is 59, which is kind of scary to me, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Um, People with the gate of sexuality, you can immediately feel closeness to them. And for them, it can kind of be easy to go from romantic partner to romantic partner and, have these different relationships. But at the same time, it can start young as with a mother figure or someone else in your life as a child, kind of that sleeping phoenix energy where you get really close to someone and then kind of the relationship fizzles out and then like something else is reborn from that. So,
Wow. Okay. So,
yeah,
and when I was looking her up, I mean, she's been married a couple of times at
right.
least, I think. I know
Yeah.
she like got married to someone and then like got divorced pretty quickly after. Like I'm talking like a matter of like weeks or months after that.
Yeah.
And was kind of like disillusioned by his intentions and things like that. But so this is just very interesting. Not and also that like the way that she can instantly make someone feel comfortable,
Yep.
specifically on her talk show, things like that. This is like so
Yeah.
spot on.
So if you go to gate 34, this is even more coming through here. Um, this is her charismatic and her magnetic energy that she has. It's this pure sacral life force energy. So this is one of her superpowers, and that's grounding in gate 20 of wanting to share authentically and unfiltered truth in the now. So gate 20 is the gate of the now, in the present moment. And you can see this come through so much on her talk show. You know, she's really wanting to, at least from my perspective, she's wanting to share an authentic and unfiltered way and help others do that, right?
Yeah. Mhm. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know anything
her cross.
about her cross
Yeah.
before this. So this is fascinating to me.
Yeah. And so just like in her essence of her cross, and I mean, a side note to all of this, as an astrology or human design reader, you know, we're really just trying to translate energy or translate language to the energetics of what we're talking about, right? So her essence, it can be this life theme of rebirth and renewal through specifically emotions and relationships. And she can just have a deep drive to live authentically, to act when it's aligned and to kind of follow her inner rhythms. And she's a manifesting generator, so you know they can sometimes want to be busy and kind of feel like they just have to be busy just to be busy, but it's really about getting clear on what they're here to be busy about and what those things are that they actually love, that they want to be busy about.
Mm.
Um, and she's also just transforming the world through her own personal evolution. So she does have that personal karma. You know, it's not really anything that she has to do. It's just her being fully alive and present.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Wow.
that's true.
Fascinating.
Hmm.
Great example.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like we could talk about her chart forever,
Yeah, I know.
but maybe let's do your chart, Sydney. What do you think
Okay,
about that?
sure.
Okay, so you're a Libra rising, um, with your chart ruler Venus down here in Aquarius in the fifth house. And you also have your sun and moon in the fifth house. So your chart is really interesting because your chart ruler, your sun, and your moon, like the three biggest components of your chart, are all in Aquarius and all in the fifth house.
Hmm.
So a Libra rising is, you know, someone who really cares about harmony, peace, connection, relationships, beauty, art, connecting with other people. And all of this energy is really directed towards the fifth house of creativity. Um, the fifth house is really the one of the best houses in the birth chart because it represents all like good kind of fun things of creativity, of play, of leisure, of children and pregnancy and sex and sexuality, of fun things that we do for leisure and play and just because we want to, you know.
Hmm.
And so I'm curious for you. How might this show up in your life?
Well, I mean, I'm always someone that is focused on aesthetics and beauty and having like the Aquarius aspect of having unique, pretty things around me. So a blend of that, of Libra and Aquarius. I'm just so focused on what my aesthetic is and what looks good to me.
Yes,
I
I
see
can
that.
vouch for that. Like
Yeah.
your house is so Libran and so Venusian, like
Yeah.
the way that you decorate, it's very feminine. You know, it's
Yes.
very soft and
Yeah.
um but like definitely have like unique art pieces throughout your house. I mean,
Mhm.
like look at your background in your photo.
Yeah.
It's like so Venusian. So
Yeah. And I think that comes in the way I dress too and the colors I'm drawn to. And my aunt one time was like, all of your stuff is just so flowy and airy. And yeah, it was. It still is.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, Chanel pointed out to me recently that, singing comes through, my singing comes through here. And
Mhm.
I'm not everybody knows this about me, but I am a really good singer and I've sung in different bands in the past and performed
Mhm.
and um that hasn't been my whole life, but that came in a little later in life. I've been doing that for the past 5, 6 years on and off.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think that is really radiated here. And I've always been had a love for children. Like at a young age, I was like, I'm gonna have 4 kids. I was always the babysitter, started babysitting at 13, 14, did that all the time. I even had a job after school in high school that I would go straight from school to babysitting for like junior, senior year. So I did that for a couple years. I was gonna have this
Yes,
nanny
because fifth
job.
house is the house of children. I don't know if
Yeah,
I know
you
I
did.
said,
You said
okay.
that.
Okay, I want to make sure.
But it's just funny that my moon rules my MC, my career line, and I have had different jobs to have to do with kids in my life. So I think that comes out here. And one thing I would love to do at some point is maybe bring human design into schools in some way and kind of look at the different types and profiles and the way kids learn through their chart and, help support the classroom in that way. I think that would be a fascinating job.
Yeah,
So,
that's super interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I'm thinking about you and all of your fifth house stuff, like singing, it, like it came to mind immediately for me. Like, oh, like that's a creative outlet for you, you know? I mean, like
Yeah.
super creative. And you were like, huh, I never thought of that. And I just thought that was funny because and then we kind of talked about how sometimes it can be hard for us to see ourselves and like really see ourselves through like the context of our chart because it's just so innate to us. It's just like trying to see the forest through the trees, you know, like you
Yes.
don't always see those aspects of yourself. Or like sometimes during readings, I'm like, just, telling somebody that this energy is really prominent in their chart. And they're like, yeah, maybe, I guess, kind of. And then
Yeah.
like something will come out later and they're like the sun will be in the 11th house of like community. And they're like, oh, yeah. And, I have all of these like connections that really helped me build my business or whatever. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's your sun in your 11th house. The community
Yeah.
is a very big part of your life. And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess I never realize that,
Yes.
and so it is sometimes helpful to have, you know, an astrologer or maybe someone else to like kind of help you actually visualize
Yeah.
your own chart.
And that's the same thing with the 4 gates that I'm talking about that encompass the Incarnation Cross. They are the most prominent energies in your chart. So they can feel just supernatural to you. Like it's just something that you do every day. Like I said, it's going to come out in everything that you do. And when you hear these different energies or qualities that you have or gifts that you have, like Chanel said, it can kind of feel like, well, yeah, I guess. But in reality, it's actually might be something that you're just doing all the time just naturally and it's kind of like running on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it is hard sometimes to have the awareness of it. But just sometimes listening to these things and hearing them and having them come to awareness, it can then later spark something later for you, maybe in a couple days or a week from now. And you're like, oh yeah, like Chanel's example, like I have always had community in my life in some way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Super, super interesting.
Yeah.
And in terms of your incarnation cross, let's see what you have happening here.
Okay. So my incarnation cross is the left angle cross of masks. It has 13 gates 13, 17, 43, and 23. I'm in the quarter of initiation and I have that transpersonal karma. So, about the other or how I affect other people. And my life theme is about guiding others by kind of weaving insight, leadership, personal expression into that. And it's often through like the correct timing, through kind of revealing a deeper truth behind the mask. And when I first heard masks, I was like, okay, I don't really understand what that is. Um, but it can kind of be like, as gate 13 is all about observing and listening and holding space for others. So that's, my son's superpower. And it can kind of be like a mask that I can wear with different people. So I'm kind of mirroring that for others. So I kind of reflect back who they are. So I'm kind of here to share truth through masks and guide others by helping them understand themselves more clearly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as a
So,
projector, I mean, that's something that you can see very clearly,
yes.
and
Yeah,
people need
exactly.
that guidance on.
Yeah. And so that listening and observing piece and holding space for others that grounds in the gate 7, which is just leadership towards the best direction. And then the other part of it is gate 43. This is just having unique insights or internal knowing, which I've always felt like I've had that. And then grounding that into gate 23, which is simplifying and articulating complex ideas and inner truths. Um, so people with this cross, like myself, who can feel like old souls with more modern voices, holding wisdom from the past and a vision for the future. And it can kind of sometimes be seen as mysterious. It can kind of have this energy of transforming other people's lives without them even knowing it. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit about my cross.
Wow. It is so true. It's so you.
Yeah,
Ah, it's so you.
yeah, I know.
Very, very cool. Very interesting. Do you want to do my chart next, or
Yeah,
should
let's do
we?
it.
Okay, we can do my chart. Let me put in my info. Okay, so I'm a Capricorn rising, um, which Capricorn risings can be um, leaders, people who initiate things with the Capricorn. They can be maybe come off a little bit more serious. And I think that like sometimes I can come across that way, even if I don't necessarily mean to be coming
Yeah.
across that way. I think that is like my Capricorn risingness.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think Capricorns can sometimes kind of grow up fast or be wise beyond their years, and I think I resonate with that whole thing of being a Capricorn rising. I'm 6 years older than my younger brother, and, we were raised by a single mom, and I kind of took on more of a maybe parental figure for my younger brother growing up, which I think Capricorn risings can kind of maybe age in reverse. like start
Mm,
out being seen as very like old and wise and kind of like lighten up and become more playful as they go on, and I
yeah.
definitely resonate with that part of being a Capricorn.
Yeah.
Um, my chart ruler is Saturn here in the 12th house, and it is conjunct Uranus. And Uranus is a big kind of factor in my chart ruler since it's very close to my Saturn. Um, Meaning I'm a little, unique, march to the beat of my own drum, do my own thing, which I definitely resonate with that. And the 12th house is a big, part of my life direction. And the 12th house is the house of, in ancient astrology, it's metacosmos, which is kind of like the world between worlds, spirituality,
Mm,
kind of diving into that. And that has been a huge theme throughout my whole life. I've
huge
always been
theme.
into those those topics, which is why I'm interested in astrology and spirituality. I mean, it's been such a big part of my life, like really my whole life, you
Mm,
know. And I have the sun in the 10th house. Um, and kind of like looking back, like my career has always been so important to me. And I've always wanted to strive to be successful and to, really build my career. And if you don't know this about me, I had a very long career in really HR and recruiting. Um, and was in management for years, and really up until the South Node and the Libra eclipses hit my 10th house when I had my son and was laid off during maternity leave. And so now I'm kind of just taking some time off for that while I figure out my next steps. But, I am meant to kind of live out my life's purpose through my professional career and my public life. And I very strongly resonate with that. That has always been something that has been super important to me in my life.
wow. The astrology is spot on.
It is. It's very, very interesting. Yeah. Um, and if we do quickly want to talk about like my moon in the sixth house, I have my moon in Gemini, and just in general, like I am a very, like, I process things very intellectually. The moon in Gemini is like what you need to feel nourished and secure and safe. And I think my initial reaction is to read about something or learn about something or talk it through with somebody, which is all well and good and, very helpful to me. But I also do feel like I need to remind myself to just feel my emotions sometimes instead of always processing them intellectually. So as the
Mm,
Gemini moon, doing those things is good, but when is doing those things also preventing me from just feeling my feelings, which might be what I need to do, you know. And that's
mm.
something that I've recognized as myself as a Gemini moon.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Um, and maybe we'll talk about my Incarnation Cross. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Okay. To me, your incarnation cross is so you. You tell me what you think.
Okay.
You have the left angle cross of upheaval. So gates 18, 17, 39, and 38. And you're in that quarter of duality. So remember bonding, connecting, and you have that transpersonal karma. So how it's affecting the other. And your life theme is to challenge any situation where fundamental human values are lacking or being overridden. And I feel like that is so you. And with gate 18, you have this superpower of empowering yourself and others. And this is the gate of correction. So you can you can see what's off and needs fixed. And it's not in like this critiquing way, but more so in like a loving way of just showing people how it could be better. And you ground in this through gate 17. And we talked about this in the last episode. And if you remember, gate 17 is about sharing your opinions. So you can ground in this energy by sharing that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then your other superpower is gate 39. And this kind of goes along with gate 18 in a way. It's just pushing people to be better. So you can kind of push people's emotional buttons in a way and spark people out of their comfort zones and thus pushing them into more authentic living, in the end. And you ground in this in gate 38 by just standing up and fighting for what you believe in to make the world a better place. So Chanel's someone who, and if you have this cross too, you're someone who's a bold thinker, a truth speaker. You're here to say the things others might not. And Chanel does this naturally, like when we're out at a restaurant or even in college at a bar. I feel like you would just say your opinion and what was on your mind. You would do this naturally. And sometimes it would cause little friction in whoever was there and we were talking to. And it's like, okay, do we need to leave the situation? But she's sparking the she's she's saying things that others might not. I was thinking the same thing, but she's the one to say it. I can think of a really good example of this. I was pregnant. We were on this boat. We were touring this boat in Pittsburgh, going through the three rivers, and we were like in this kind of more secluded section of the boat. It was us and our two partners, and we're all like really interested in listening to the history of Pittsburgh. Like we really want to hear the story. We're all into it. And this group comes over, this loud, drunk group, and they're talking and we can't hear anything all of a sudden.
It was like a history tour of Pittsburgh,
Yeah,
and they were treating it as like this is a party boat. We're
right.
getting wasted.
And
Like
this
they were
is
wearing like lights and like it was somebody's birthday. Like they were partying.
and this isn't like 9 o'clock at 10 o'clock at night. This is like 5 p.m. Like we're on like the grandma boat. But I don't know how some people thought it was like a party boat. And I'm pregnant, I'm pretty uncomfortable. I'm in my
You
third
were very
trimester.
pregnant. You were
Yeah,
like 9 months pregnant.
it was hot. I was nauseous a lot of my pregnancy and I was on a boat and that I'm already get kind of sick on boats. And I just remember thinking like I really want to say something to these people, but I'm not going to because I know it's going to kind of be uncomfortable. And like we just kept sitting there and no one was saying anything. And then Chanel says something and I was so grateful that she did in that moment and they did move. But like she has that's just the type of energy I'm trying to get across. Like she is here to see what needs fixed and help make it better. And it's not through like this harsh critiquing way. It's just through like, okay, how can we have this constructive disruption and
Oh
and
my God.
challenge it?
That is hysterical.
Yeah.
That is so funny. You're right. That is exactly a perfect example.
Yeah.
Like, because it was like I couldn't help myself, like saying that, but it was like we were like sitting there, and we were like away in a secluded part of the boat. It's not like we were like in the middle of everything
Right.
where people were talking. And it literally just like came out of me. Like I couldn't even like stop it.
Right.
It was just like something that I had to do. And yeah, I mean, we were there with our partners too. It was like the four of us. And yeah, you're right. I am very much like that.
And
And
I
I can't even help it sometimes.
but this is such a
And
good
sometimes I
example.
wish I wasn't like that though,
I
and that I
know.
didn't have
But that's part of your magic. It's experiencing a tension between wanting peace versus needing truth. Like that's your magic.
that.
This is such a good example of, like I said, how this can show up just in your day-to-day life. Like your life
Mm-hmm.
purpose. You're like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with my job and my life? And like what should I do in the world? But like it's just it's in everything that you do.
Yeah, it's so true. And Trevor and I have my partner and I have like this joke where it's like, if he needs to like if we're like at a restaurant and like something's not right or if he needs something, he's always like, okay, you're the one who's gonna like say that. You're the one who's gonna tell the waiter, you're the one who's gonna like do that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, of course I will. No problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um that's really funny. It does feel like somewhat validating to me, you know, to have that and know that about myself. Um And I do have Mars opposite my sun too in my astrology chart, which I think does,
Mm,
even though I'm a Libra sun, I have Mars like directly aspecting my sun in opposition. I have Mars and Aries. So I think that makes me a little bit more um, willing to rock the boat and
mm,
a little bit more able to handle or withstand, conflict than like a typical Libra would.
yeah.
So I just always think it's interesting how like this human design stuff, a lot of the same themes like play into astrology too.
Yeah. I know.
Fascinating. Okay, maybe we do one more example of
Yeah.
Kaylee's chart because she's a 4-1, which is that super rare one. So
Oh
I
yeah,
think
let's
she
do that one.
has um a very interesting one. I will just share her chart. Um So this is Kaylee's chart. So shout out Kaylee, who let us use her chart as an example here. Um, Her chart is very interesting. I'll go over maybe one of the most interesting facets of her chart. Um, so Kaylee is a Gemini sun, and her Gemini sun is in the 12th house. And she also has Venus and Mercury as well in Gemini in the 12th house. So she has a Gemini stellium in the 12th. And, the 12th house, kind of like I was explaining earlier a little bit, really um, can be the house of world between worlds, but it can also be like the house of suffering, the house of kind of mental health struggles or emotional, psychological pain, the house where a lot of those things live. And it's a house that we kind of like sweep these things under the rug and like don't necessarily want to deal with them. But then when we have 12th house activations in our chart, these topics can really come out to be seen and be dealt with. And so when you have the sun in the 12th house, what does that mean? And Kaylee is an amazing healer. She does EMDR work. Um, she, has her own practice of healing and does incredible work. And has kind of come to this place and has been very open about her own, personal mental health struggles and how she's been able to kind of overcome them and now really works with others to help them do that.
Wow.
And so I just think she's such a great example of her son, being in the 12th house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just so fascinating and in Gemini. And she's a great speaker and writer and has done a TEDx talk, which is, very Gemini, very characteristic of a Gemini as well. So
Wow.
her chart is very spot on and very, very interesting.
Yeah, and this is a good example of someone who is living in alignment, and
Mhm.
is tapped into their energy and is kind of living out the full expression because you can be stuck kind of in that lower expression. And when you're down there, it makes it harder for you to resonate sometimes with what we're talking about, with the energies of the sun, the moon, the rising sign, or different gates or gifts in your chart. Sometimes if you're kind of stuck in the not self theme as you would put it in human design, it can it can feel like you're not really resonating with it. But I like this example because it just what you've said about art, it just feels like someone who is in alignment with their energetics and using them in a way that feels correct for them, you know, and tapping in and using her strategy and authority correctly, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. Yeah, sure. Well, we'll take a look at her Incarnation Cross. Um, Here we go. Pull this up.
Okay. So she has the juxtaposition cross of experience, gates 35, 5, 22, and 47. She's in the quarter of civilization. So, building. And this is the 4-1 profile. So remember that 3%, it's fixed or no karma. And just based on what you just said, she's so in line with her cross because her life theme is about moving through experience with emotional depth and timing. So,
Wow.
transforming personal stories into insight, expression, and grace.
That that is her cross?
Yes. And
Oh my gosh.
Gate 35 is about sharing experiences and learning by doing. So like learning from her own experiences, you know, having to go through kind of that depth of the 12th house. Like I have chills right now. It's just like it's just all so connected.
Mm,
And so that's her superpower is sharing through experience. And the way she grounds in that is through gate 5. And that's all about her own rituals and routines. So kind of grounding in her own natural timing and her own natural consistency of the way she does things. And then her other superpower is gate 22. So this is about graceful timing, emotional presence, and depth. And gate 47 is having ahas or epiphanies that can help others have understanding. So,
mm.
so the essence of this cross is kind of experiencing life to the fullest, and processing it deeply on an emotional and mental and spiritual level, and then inspiring others by being real and raw and reflective, and especially when sharing what she's learned. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't watched Kaylee's TEDx Talks, I'm going to plug it here. Her name is Kaylee Danu. And maybe we'll put it in the show notes too, to watch her TEDx talk about her own struggles and how she has overcome that. I can't remember exactly the name of the talk, but it's something about, um, oh, I can't remember it. I'll have to look it up. Um, but her talk is all about how she has like overcome very, very dark places in her life. Um, and, you know, and now how she helps others do that. So, I
wow.
mean, that's literally exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and she's here to extract wisdom from the chaos. So this
Yep.
cross this cross can kind of feel like you're hungry for the next chapter, but it's also paired with kind of finding that stillness and grace in your own routines and timing required to kind of process and integrate like the last experience that you had.
Mm,
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know her personally, but I just, with what you just said from looking at her astrology chart, it just aligns so well with her incarnation cross.
yeah, it absolutely does. It does. And Kaylee, you'll have to let us know if this resonates with you.
Yeah,
I'm
we
sure
would love to know.
it does. Wow. Wow. This is truly fascinating. I could sit here and do different charts with you all day, probably.
Yeah.
but I hope this has given everyone a deeper sense of understanding of their own chart. Um, we'd love to hear from you if anything resonated with you, or if you did get any insight into your own charts as well. And yeah.
And if there's any topics that you're interested in or want us to talk about, DM us on Instagram, let us know, or you can email us, stellarsisterspodcast@gmail.com. And you can check us out there, stellarsisterspodcast.com. If you want to get a reading, you can click on readings. You can book a reading with Chanel or with me. And yeah,
Yeah, and also please like or rate or leave a review for us. It would mean the world to us if you did that. And if you like this podcast, if you would give it a like or give it a review, we'd really, really appreciate it.
yeah.
And thank you so much for listening. This episode was so fun, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.